There's something that can destroy your self-esteem more deeply than any screaming, any physical aggression, or any betrayal. These are seemingly simple words whispered in your ear as if they were absolute truths about who you are. These 5 cruel accusations are like psychological poison. They enter slowly, spread through your mind, and corrode your identity from within. You've heard at least one of them. Maybe you've heard them all. And the worst part, you probably started believing they were true. What I'm going to reveal today isn't just about words. It's about how narcissists use these specific accusations to break you emotionally, to make you question your own sanity, to transform you into a smaller and more controllable version of yourself. Sigmund Freud said that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, but when it comes to narcissists, nothing is just what it seems. Every accusation they make is a psychological weapon, carefully chosen to hit exactly where it hurts most. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to discover will completely change how you see these words and, more importantly, how you react to them. Maria was always a calm person. She worked as a nurse, took care of her elderly parents, and rarely raised her voice. But there were moments, maybe 5 times in 2 years of relationship, when she would explode. Not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't take it anymore. When her boyfriend arrived 3 hours late without warning, when he flirted shamelessly with other women in front of her, when he simply ignored her basic needs. In those rare moments, Maria reacted and immediately heard, "Wow, you're so intense. I can't talk to you when you get like this." And you know what's worse? Maria started to believe it. This is the first and one of the most devastating accusations that narcissists use, turning your natural reaction to abuse into something pathological. They provoke, ignore, disrespect, and manipulate until you break. And when you finally react, not because you're intense, but because you're human, they point their finger and make you seem unstable. The narcissist counts on this. They know that 95% of the time you stay calm, controlled, trying to be the perfect person to avoid conflicts. But they also know exactly which buttons to push to make you explode. And when that happens, they're already ready with the accusation, "See, you're too intense." Freud talked about projection, when we attribute to others what we don't want to see in ourselves. The narcissist projects their own emotional instability onto you. They are the truly dysregulated ones, but they make you carry that label. Tell me here in the comments, what city are you watching from? I want to know where the people who are discovering these truths with me are located. The reality is that you're not intense. You're a normal person, having normal reactions to abnormal situations. But the narcissist needs you to believe that the problem is with you, not with their behavior. Let me tell you about Robert. He was married for 15 years to a woman who turned "you're too intense" into a weapon of psychological destruction. Every time Robert questioned where she was until 2 in the morning, he heard, "You're too intense, too controlling." When he asked about strange charges on the credit card, the answer was always the same. "Relax. You get too intense about these things." Robert started policing himself. He stopped asking questions. He stopped expressing legitimate concerns. Because he had internalized that any reaction from him was too much intensity. This is gaslighting disguised as concern. The narcissist takes your natural emotional response, which would be perfectly acceptable in any healthy relationship, and transforms it into evidence that you have emotional problems. The cruel irony is that the more you try to prove you're not intense, the more you become a shadow of yourself. You stop questioning, stop demanding respect, stop having basic expectations, and that's exactly what they want, you completely controllable. Freud observed that our mind has defense mechanisms to protect itself from painful truths. For the narcissist, Calling you intense is a mechanism to avoid facing the truth that they are abusive and you are reacting appropriately to abuse. The next accusation I'm going to reveal is even more sinister, because it transforms your emotional vulnerability into something dirty and manipulative. Imagine the scene. You're crying because you discovered another lie, or you're scared because they exploded in anger again, or you're simply trying to express how hurt you feel by something they did. And then you hear the words that cut deeper than any scream. "Stop manipulating me. You're just trying to make me feel guilty." This is the second cruel accusation, turning your genuine emotional expression into manipulation. Carol lived this for 8 years. Every time she cried, and look, she wasn't one to cry easily, her husband said she was putting on a show to get what she wanted. When she expressed fear of his angry outbursts, she heard, "You're trying to manipulate me so I don't defend myself." The result? Carol stopped crying. She stopped expressing fear. She stopped showing any genuine emotion. She became an emotionally dead person because she learned that feeling was manipulating. Here's the cruel reality. Narcissists accuse you of manipulation because they themselves are master manipulators. They know all the tactics because they use them constantly. So when they see you being genuinely vulnerable, they interpret it through their own distorted lens. For them, tears can only be tactics, fear can only be drama, pain can only be manipulation. Because that's how they function, so they assume you function that way too. Freud would say this is another classic projection. The narcissist projects their own manipulative nature onto you, especially in moments when you're being most authentic and vulnerable. The most devastating thing is that this accusation creates an impossible cycle. If you show emotion, you're manipulative. If you don't show emotion and disconnect, you're also manipulative for playing the victim. You literally can't win. But wait until you discover the third accusation. It hits the very core of your human sensitivity. Stop being so sensitive. How many times have you heard this? After being humiliated in front of friends, after being treated with contempt, after having your feelings completely ignored. And then comes the accusation that makes you question whether you have the right to feel anything. This third accusation is particularly cruel because it attacks exactly what makes you human, your ability to feel. I met a woman, Patricia, who after years of hearing "you're too sensitive," started medicating herself to feel nothing. She took anti-anxiety medication to be able to stay in the same room as her ex-husband during the children's visits, because she had learned that feeling pain when she was mistreated was a defect of hers. The narcissist uses this accusation strategically. They know that empathetic people, who are their preferred targets, will question their own sensitivity when repeatedly accused of this. It's like telling someone who's bleeding that they're exaggerating the pain. The truth is that your sensitivity isn't a defect. It's exactly what the narcissist exploited to win you over in the beginning. They approached you because you felt deeply, because you had empathy, because you could connect emotionally. But now that they have you, that same sensitivity needs to be suppressed because it bothers them. Freud talked about how our psyche adapts to survive. When repeatedly accused of being too sensitive, your mind begins to suppress feelings as a defense mechanism. You become emotionally anesthetized so you won't be accused of feeling too much. But here's what they don't tell you. A narcissist saying you're too sensitive is like calling water too wet. Sensitivity is your nature. It's how you process the world. Trying not to be sensitive is like trying not to breathe. The fourth accusation I'm going to reveal is perhaps the most confusing of all because it comes disguised as love. This is the most sinister accusation of all because it comes wrapped as if it were a gift. I love you despite you being a mess. I accept you even though you're kind of crazy. You're lucky I have patience with complicated people like you. Sound familiar? It should, because it's one of the most effective tactics that exist to destroy your self-esteem while pretending to be kind. Mark heard this for 3 years from his girlfriend. "I love you despite you being kind of disorganized and forgetful." The problem, Mark was only disorganized because she constantly changed the rules. He was only forgetful because she gave contradictory information and then pretended she had been clear. She created his flaws and then painted herself as a hero for loving him despite them. This accusation works on 2 devastating fronts. First, it makes you believe you have serious flaws that make you difficult to love. Second, it creates a false sense of gratitude. You should be grateful for someone being able to put up with you. The result is that you stop believing you deserve unconditional love. You start accepting crumbs of affection as if they were great favors. After all, who else would be capable of loving someone as complicated as you? Freud wrote about how our self-image is formed through the gaze of others, especially those we consider important. When someone who supposedly loves you constantly points out your flaws and then brags about loving you despite them, your self-image fragments. You internalize the narrative that you are fundamentally flawed, but lucky to have found someone generous enough to accept you. This keeps you trapped, grateful, and afraid of losing this exceptional love. The reality, true love doesn't have despite. True love doesn't keep a list of your flaws to throw in your face as a favor. True love sees your imperfections and embraces them as part of who you are. But the 5th and final accusation is the one that closes the cycle in the most devastating way. The last accusation is the one that completes the cycle of psychological destruction. "You make me act this way. If you didn't provoke me, I wouldn't react. You know exactly how to get on my nerves." With this phrase, the narcissist manages to do the impossible, transform you into the one responsible for the abuse you suffer. I remember talking to a client who told me, "Doctor, I really do provoke him sometimes. I know that certain things I say make him nervous, but I say them anyway. Do I deserve it when he explodes?" This woman had been so well trained that she assumed total responsibility for the emotional violence she suffered. In her mind, there were words and behaviors of hers that justified his attacks. This accusation is the pinnacle of manipulation because it completely inverts the power dynamic. The aggressor becomes the victim of your provocations, and you become responsible not only for your actions, but also for his actions. It's as if a thief said, "If you didn't have something I wanted, I wouldn't have stolen." The logic is absurd, but when you're inside the narcissistic relationship, after hearing the other 4 accusations repeatedly, your capacity for logical reasoning is already compromised. Freud would talk about how we assume excessive guilt when we're in vulnerable positions. It's a psychological mechanism. If the guilt is ours, then we have control to change. If we admit that the guilt is totally the other person's, we have to face our own powerlessness in the situation. The narcissist exploits exactly this. They know it's less painful for you to accept guilt than to accept that you're trapped with someone who chooses to be abusive regardless of what you do. But here's the truth they'll never admit. Nothing you say or do justifies abuse. Nothing. Now that you know the 5 accusations, you need to understand how they work together to destroy you. Now you need to understand something crucial. These 5 accusations don't work alone. They form a perfect system of psychological control that functions like a mental prison. I'll show you how. First, they make you question your perception of reality. When you're constantly called intense, manipulative, and too sensitive, you stop trusting your own feelings. You start thinking, "Am I exaggerating? Is he right?" Second, they create emotional dependency. When someone loves you despite your flaws, you feel grateful for this special love. You believe that no one else would be capable of loving someone as problematic as you. Third, they make you assume responsibility for his behavior. "You make me act this way" transforms you into the cause of the relationship's problems. Now you're always walking on eggshells, trying not to provoke his reactions. It's a perfect cycle. You question your reality, feel grateful for the love you receive, and assume responsibility for the problems. Result? You become completely controlled and manipulable. Anna lived exactly in this cycle. After 2 years of hearing these accusations, she could no longer trust her own feelings. When her boyfriend came home drunk and aggressive, she thought, "Am I being too sensitive? Maybe I provoked this. At least he loves me despite me being complicated." Anna had become a prisoner of her own mind. Freud observed that our psyche always seeks coherence. When contradictory messages bombard our mind, we create narratives to make sense of them. Unfortunately, in the narcissistic relationship, the narrative we create usually is, "I am the problem." The narcissist knows this. They systematically plant these 5 accusations because they know your mind will try to connect them into a coherent story. And that story always ends with you being the villain of your own life. But there's a way to break this devastating cycle. Now that you know the 5 cruel accusations, I'm going to teach you something that can change your life. How to identify these manipulations in real time before they destroy you completely. First sign, observe the timing. These accusations always appear when you're expressing a legitimate need or reacting to bad behavior. If you question something and are immediately called intense, that's not a coincidence. Second sign, notice the pattern. These accusations repeat cyclically. They're not unique comments. They're labels that stick to you and are constantly reinforced. Third sign, observe how you feel afterward. If a conversation leaves you questioning your sanity, your perception of reality, or your worth as a person, you're being manipulated. Fourth sign, see if there's reciprocity. In healthy relationships, both parties take responsibility for their own behaviors. If only you are always wrong, always exaggerating, always causing problems, something is fundamentally wrong. Laura learned to identify these signs after years of therapy. She told me, "Doctor, now when my ex-husband starts with 'you're being too dramatic,' I know exactly what's happening. He's trying to make me question my reaction to something abusive he did." Knowledge is power. When you can name the manipulation the moment it happens, it loses much of its power over you. Freud talked about how bringing the unconscious to consciousness is liberating. When these manipulative tactics leave your unconscious, where they operated automatically, and enter your consciousness, you gain the power to choose how to respond. But identifying isn't enough. You need to know how to protect yourself. And that's what I'm going to teach you in the last chapter. Practical strategies to free yourself from this psychological prison once and for all. If you've made it this far, you've already taken the first and most important step, recognizing that these 5 cruel accusations are not truths about you. They are psychological weapons used to control you. Now I'm going to give you the keys to your emotional freedom. First key, reject the labels. When someone calls you intense, manipulative, too sensitive, a mess, or tries to make you responsible for their behavior, you have the right to completely reject these labels. Tell yourself, "This is not the truth about me. This is an attempt at manipulation." Second key, validate your own emotions. Your feelings are valid, always. If something hurts you, you have the right to feel hurt. If something makes you angry, you have the right to feel angry. Don't allow anyone to tell you how you should or shouldn't feel. Third key, establish firm boundaries. I don't accept being called intense, manipulative, too sensitive. If you continue talking to me like this, I will end this conversation. And more importantly, keep what you promise. Fourth key, seek external validation. Talk to people who truly know you. Go to therapy. Participate in support groups. You need healthy voices to counterbalance the toxic voices you've heard for so long. Fifth key, remember your truth. Make a list of your real qualities, your values, the moments when you were strong, compassionate, resilient. Post this list where you can see it every day. As Freud said, the mind that opens to a new idea will never return to its original size. Now that you know these 5 cruel accusations and how they work, you can no longer be manipulated in the same way. Your healing begins when you stop accepting these accusations as truths and start seeing them for what they really are: desperate attempts by someone to maintain power over you. You deserve relationships where you can be yourself, feel what you feel, express your needs without being labeled or attacked. You deserve love that doesn't come with despite. You deserve emotional peace, and now you have the knowledge to achieve it. If this content changed your perspective, if you recognized yourself in these situations, leave a comment telling your experience. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these truths. And if you want to continue this journey of self-knowledge and emotional liberation, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Every week I bring content that will help you build healthier relationships and protect your mental peace. Remember, knowing these tactics is the first step to never being a victim of them again. Your emotional freedom starts now, at this exact moment when you decide to no longer accept these cruel accusations as truths about who you are. You are strong, you are valuable, and you deserve much more than crumbs of respect disguised as love.